Hey everybody, it's Tanner Mulvihill. Hope you're enjoying the podcast so far. You know, every week I stress on this show the importance of asking for the business, and I wouldn't be a very good podcast host if I didn't take the opportunity to do the same. If you would consider leaving me a 5-star review on whatever platform you are listening to this show on, that would be greatly appreciated. And if you know a top real estate agent you think should be on the show, please let me know that as well. I'd love the opportunity to hear from them and tell their story. In this episode, I sat down with Michele Casper, brokered by Keller Williams Metro Center in the greater Richmond area. Michele shared with me why she is focusing on past client referrals and other agent referrals in 2023, a reminder to always smile when you dial, the proper mindset to have in today's market, and finally a story about a storm, a closing, and a tree at the new house. You can see where this is going. And now, my interview with Michele Casper on the Virginia is for Realtors podcast. Well, welcome back, everyone, to another edition of Virginia's for Realtors, now in our second season. I'm pleased to be joined today by Michele Casper, brokered by Keller Williams Metro Center. Michele, how are you today?
Hey, good. How are you? Thank you so much for having me on.
I'm doing good. You want to hear a crazy stat?
Yes, please.
Next month, I hit 20 years in this business.
Hats off to you, because
Thank
that's
you.
a huge accomplishment.
I kind of think so too, just because it's weird to think like been doing this for 20 years, right? You're in your 7 or 8 right now. So you probably feel like, man, I got a good idea what's going on. And you're not like the old hat now, but in a couple of years you will be. You'll be like,
Yes.
I've been doing this for 10 years. And then when you get to 20, you know, like a lot of people that when I got in are out, they're retired. I'm doing a new agent orientation in a couple of weeks. So I'll see the fresh faces as they come in, right? It's cool to see the changes in the industry, just everything that's gone on. So
I can see why, because you are so good at what you do. And it takes a really good, honest, and a hardworking person and who actually knows what they're doing to be able to stick in this business.
I appreciate that. It's definitely been a learning curve in a lot of cases, but you know, if you do it long enough and you stick around long enough and you do the right things long enough, it really pays off. And it's been a wonderful career. I'm excited that I'll have hit 20 years, but this isn't about me. Let's talk about you today, because I love talking to agents all across the state. So let's go ahead and start for the audience where you're at, and then we'll kind of go into a little detail about how you got in the business and all those things.
Sure. So I'm in Richmond, Virginia.
Okay.
Born and raised. And I work a lot with military families who are PCSing to Fort Gregg Adams, formerly Fort Lee. So I work all around the Richmond area. So being a Richmond native, I've actually lived in a lot of different parts of the city. So I actually grew up in Short Pump, went to school downtown, moved over, I would say more of like the deeper West End, a little after college. And I am now more on the Chesterfield side out in Moseley and Midlothian. So I have basically been the full radius around the city. So I'm very well versed in all things Richmond.
It's kind of nice though, too, that you have that different experiences, because, you know, it's like, oh, I know that spot, even though it's 20 miles away from where you normally be. I know how to get there. You're not like always having to put in the GPS to figure stuff out. And
absolutely.
And then also too, you can think back to like, all right, 10, 15 years ago, this community was up and coming. It's retained its value, or it hasn't retained its value. And that's something that you can kind of pass along to clients too.
Absolutely. One of the really fun things about Richmond that I've loved is seeing the growth and really getting to see in the last, I would say 5 to 7 years, the areas that were back many years ago were like, oh, I don't know that I want to venture out that way or buy a house out that way. They just didn't have as much going on, or it just wasn't as popular. Those are the hot spots now.
Right.
It's a completely different town than pre-pandemic. So yeah.
So let's talk about how you decided to get into this then. So dealing a lot with military clients, had you made some military moves yourself and then came back, or how did that work?
No, my dad was a Marine.
Okay.
Both of my grandfathers served. My uncle served. Did I make any military moves myself? I didn't. So I actually got in the business starting as an assistant. I was actually in college. My parents' realtor actually hired me on. I never really was into school, full disclosure. It just was not my thing, even though I was in school. I did the whole thing. I just never felt like there was a path for me that I really connected with or found a career there that I was like, okay, this is what makes sense to me. But I always knew I loved looking at homes. And I always hear those horror stories about agents who do not know what they're doing. And my parents had a couple of those experiences and is listening to that growing up. Right. And I had interacted with an amazing agent who really did do my parents right. And I had just kind of started talking with her and saying, how do you get into the business? What does it look like? What is the process with getting your license? And I knew that I wasn't ready to become an agent, and hats off to the people at a very young age who do that, because you can. For me, I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to go sell houses. I knew that I needed to learn the business from the back end and move up the ladder in my mind as more of a learn the paperwork, learn the contract. And it's one of the biggest purchases of people's lives. Right. And I took that very seriously, even at a young age, to where I wanted to make sure that if someone is working with me to buy or sell their home, I know what I'm doing. And I'm not just flying by the seat of my pants, to make sure that I'm really giving these people the best possible service possible.
What a great entry into the business. Because you get to see the paperwork side, which is what some people struggle with. And at least you had that background of, okay, this is what we need to do. This is the order that we need to do it. So even if you didn't have practical reps of, okay, I've sold 20 houses by now. It's no, I've seen all these steps involved on what we need to do. I know who I need to call. It's just a matter of getting it done. Now, when you were growing up and around the area, like what are some of the things that you really remember about Richmond growing up that is just kind of kept its charm for you, or you really tell people about when they move there?
Something for me, I would say U crops. Are you familiar with U crops?
Yes.
So I know that probably seems very random, but I don't know if you knew that Richmond actually lost U crops for a little bit. So
I did not know that.
So they were a grocery chain that it was just an experience to go. It was a very Richmond thing. And they actually sold their business. And then the family actually came back recently with the U-Crop Market Center. They sell all the yummy food that you really wanted them to sell back then, the whole reason you went. And so that's a very quintessential, like Richmond thing I tell people about to go visit, because you can only get it here in Richmond. And then in terms of growth with actual areas, for me, growing up in Short Pump, getting Short Pump Town Center was like next level.
People come from miles away to go to Short Pump. I've gone there, I don't know, 10 times in the last year and a half. Like people go there.
It's amazing. But it's funny. You're right. They do. They come in on the big buses and they actually travel. And you'll see the big buses parked in the parking lot. I'm like, hey, it's a commitment to come here. And it was a game changer for Richmond becoming Short Pump with that.
Okay. So paint the picture for me. Was it a golf course beforehand? Was it a farm that somebody sold?
All farmland.
Do you remember it was like multiple farms that all just went up at the same time?
I could be wrong here, but I want to say it was all one farm, and it was a family who owned a lot of the land out in Goochland.
Okay.
Actually, if you go to Short Pump Town Center, you'll actually see across from it, there's still some of the land that they refused to sell.
Okay.
It's still the original family from back in the day. They wanted to keep that section of land in their family.
Very cool. I would think a lot of people throughout the state have probably been to Short Pump at some point, but there's really not much like it. I think a lot of duplicates try to be like it, but
that's it right there.
It's a big deal for sure. And it's such a driver of the area. So my wife works for Capital One and for many years went into the campus around Short Pump. So it's just a huge area. So you now have taken the plunge to start working for this agent. And then what was kind of the catalyst that you're like, okay, I'm ready to make this jump?
Yeah. So I then joined a big team and kind of started my process with, I was still young. I knew I didn't want to jump out on my own quite yet. I was still learning the sales part, right? I felt very confident in what I had been learning on the back end. Going from admin to sales, those are two very different roles. So jumping over to sales, I said, okay, I'm going to join a team, and kind of worked on that team and kind of figured out, okay, I feel confident in this now. I'm ready to kind of go out on my own and kind of do this thing. So a few years passed and I said, okay, I think I'm ready to make the jump. And I made the jump and went solo, and I've never looked back.
Very cool. So when we come back, I want to talk about kind of that first year in business for you. So we'll be right back with Michele Casper. Do you have clients considering new construction, looking for a builder that takes pride in their work and delivers a beautiful home? If so, I'm excited to tell you about Sona Homes located in Fredericksburg. If you haven't visited a new Sona home yet, reach out to my friend and sales manager, Adarsh Parbadia, at 540-419-3164. Adarsh will be able to answer all your questions about Sona Homes and make it a great experience for your clients. Again, that is Adarsh Parbadia with Sona Homes at 540-419-3164. Make sure you tell him Tanner sent you. Welcome back, everyone. So, Michele, let's talk about, that transition from I've now received my real estate license. I've joined a team, but at some point you have to make sure that you are speaking for yourself and you are letting people know that you are an agent. How did you spread the word?
So I door knocked.
Wow.
Door knocking. I did open houses. I would post on social media. I tried to get my face and my information out as much as humanly possible. And then also incorporating into, if I did have someone who was interested in working with me or had a really great experience, past clients, I would ask for those referrals.
Yes.
Right. So building on that over time is how I got to where I am now.
It starts just spreading the word and staying in front of people. And I'm always impressed by people who do the door knocking route. So what did you kind of start in your neighborhood? How did you start with that?
No, I actually picked a price point that I wanted to be in.
Wow.
So that to me was more important than talking to neighbors, because to me, talking with your neighbors is wonderful, but you have the more of those opportunities. And when you're being really purposeful in your lead generation, to me, it's pick a price point that you want to be in, get in front of those people, be consistent about it, and target in multiple ways.
Yes, that's smart. And for the people listening, there are some people that are like, oh my gosh, I can never see myself doing that. And the others are like, I'm interested in kind of how it went. Was it good, bad, and different? Did you feel relieved when you got done? Did you feel like, oh my gosh, I've accomplished something when you got done? What were your thoughts?
All of it. I felt accomplished. I was relieved, because I think building those face-to-face relationships is so important. And another thing I did too was cold call. Put me on the phone all day long. I don't mind if someone says, don't talk to me anymore. We smile and dial. That was something I learned. So I think having a combination of different avenues is really what helped me kind of get to where I am.
I love that though, the smile and dial, because how many people in this industry are afraid to pick up the phone?
Which is wild to me. On one hand, I do understand, yes, rejection is hard. Literally someone you don't know. I remember my first year in the business, I helped a woman. I would not stop calling her. She never told me to stop calling her, just caveat. But every time I called her, she would yell at me, which I realize probably sounds a little like, well, then why did you keep calling? I knew she was going through a tough time, because she would say to me, I just had a baby. I'm really struggling. And as a woman, she was going through a really tough time. And so I just kept calling and checking in on her. And I think it's also how you phrase those calls. Instead of saying, hey, can I help you buy and sell a house? Or do you know of someone looking to buy or sell a house? You come at it from a human level. She ended up buying and selling with me. It's all about how you approach people, especially in cold calling. If you come at it very salesy, who wants to be sold to on the phone by a stranger? No one. Everyone needs a marketer.
It's a very good point. One of the things I do when I'm cold calling somebody, I'll always ask, did I catch you at a bad time? It gives them an out. And a lot of times they'll be like, no. And if they legitimately have, you're just spinning your wheels, but like, no. And then you kind of go into what you're going to say. But that gives it a nice icebreaker for me. Right. And it's always been effective, whether I'm calling leads. Did I catch you at a bad time? No, I got a couple minutes. Okay, cool. Well, blah, 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 blah. And you go into what you're saying. But again, if you just do that, like, well, here's my 45-minute script that I'm going to read right off the bat, that doesn't work.
No. See, and I know that every single real estate guru is going to tell me I'm wrong. I'm not a big fan of script. That's just me. I find myself like, yes, you can sit there and have a very scripted conversation to someone. I get that it probably breaks a lot of that time down that you would probably need to be on the phone with somebody. But to me, building those connections are what leads to referrals down the road.
That's a good point. In the beginning, you really did a good job of kind of spreading the word. Now, let's talk about like your first transaction, your first family that you helped. Tell me a little bit about that.
So my first transaction, it was actually a single male. He bought a $63,000 condo.
Okay.
Very nice guy. But you already know this, but like condos are their own thing. They have their own set of guidelines. I mean, everything is kind of a little bit different. So my first true experience into the real estate world was that. So I kind of had to learn that process on top of just getting more comfortable, because I already knew some of the paperwork in the back end. So I put all that time in, but really figuring out that side of things from the jump, it was a unique experience, but I loved it.
That's a tough one to start with because, again, okay, so condo association, let's try to find the documents for that. Hopefully the listing agent was helpful and able to get you some stuff that you needed. Because, again, the guidelines are totally different on loan. So it might not be a condo that actually would have been able to, a loan officer could do.
So true.
You're right. So it's got a lot of moving pieces. Now, how did you start working with that gentleman? Did he spawn to a Facebook post? Like, how did you get him?
So I want to say it was a team lead. I want to say it was someone who I was cold calling from the list, and we ended up meeting up for a buyer consult and kind of went from there.
You have your first transaction. Now, when you're looking back at it, what were some of the things you really remember? Like, I've learned from this one and it's really helped me going forward on all of them.
So I think with it being a different kind of experience, with it being a condo, I think that really helped me have to change my mindset a little bit. Real estate is not a box. If you are looking for an in-the-box career, real estate is not for you. So you have to really look at it as every single deal is different, and you are handed a different set of, I would say, just even itinerary per day. So with that specific deal, it really showed me from my first step with that, I sometimes don't always know what I don't know. Now, can I tell you 8 years in? And could I tell you, I'm really glad I was on a team, and I was glad that I had, a sales manager who could kind of help walk me through that. Part of that reasoning was joining a team and wanting to really learn from the ground up. That way I didn't make mistakes. Right. So that understanding of everything looks different every day.
When you started, I assume you hosted a lot of open houses. What were some of the tips that you picked up on hosting a good open house?
Lots of directional signs. Obviously, the house needs to be presentable. This is something I have learned that I'm still experiencing to this day. What a seller considers presentable could be very different than what I consider presentable or what the market consider presentable. So getting there early, turning on all the light, opening up all the blinds, putting down the bathroom toilet seat, all of the things that you need to have happen, putting things away, fluffing the pillows, having a house that people walk in and say, oh, I get it. I can see myself here. Yeah. It's a lot more than just removing family pictures. Everyone knows that kind of tip. There is so much more to prepping a house than just taking stuff down and removing family photos.
That's a good point. And I think about some of the ones that I've been to. I think the agents have done a good job of making sure the house is in good condition. But then again, every so often you walk through a room, you're just like, oh, I guess they missed that one or something. Yeah. And that's the room you remember. And depending on how many houses the people looked at that day, that's how they're going to remember that particular house. Let's say we have 100 agents in front of us. And I know Keller Williams is very big on education and everything like that. What are some of the things that you're telling brand new agents right now that they should be focusing on, thinking about, things like that?
What is your niche? That is the number one thing that I would say to a new agent. And this took me a little while to learn. You are not a residential realtor specialist. That's too broad. Right. If you want to really build a business and have it be more referral based and have clients who are going to refer their friends and family, they want someone who knows that they understand them, what they're going through and their special needs. And typically people hang out, birds of a feather flock together. Right. Yeah. So if you are looking for a specific type of client, you need to be positioning yourself in your market to be the go-to agent for that.
Very smart. And that's such a great point. I think about that often on the loan side. And I think about my father, who I visited recently, and he specialized in commercial insurance for a lot of different companies. But what he did was unique and very few in his area would do it. So he was the go-to for that particular type of insurance. And when you're the go-to, at least in his case, you're not necessarily worried about price because it's like, where else are you going to go? But if you have the expertise and the experience, that's what really pays off. And I've often thought about that as far as most people know that I specialize in VA loans. And that's my goal, is to make sure that people, when they think about VA, they think about me and I'll have the answers. Now, vice versa, when you're looking at some agents now and some of the mistakes that maybe new agents are making, what are some of the things that you pick up on that you would go, I would probably stay away from that, or these are some ideas you should do instead?
I think for a new agent, where I see a lot of mistakes is someone who doesn't know their contract. So I would say that's probably one of the number one things that I see, where you see the flurry of like Facebook groups, whatever it is, somebody's messaging you like, what do? I clicked this instead of that, or I put this in there, or I forgot this. The contract is like the foundation.
Right.
If we aren't getting that right, the whole transaction's not going to be right.
Amazing point. And it's reiterated by top agents all across the state. And that's definitely one thing that top agents share, is that they know that contract, right? It's just like, wake me up and ask me to recite page 4, this section.
Literally.
No problem. And I'll give you the cliff notes on what we're looking at. That's a huge thing. Now, what's one piece of advice you got early on in your career that you've really kind of held on to that was a good one for you?
I think one of the biggest pieces of advice that I have stuck with is play nice in the sandbox with other agents.
It's a good one.
Served me well. You see when other agents don't do that, and then they get a reputation and it becomes really hard for you.
You know, it's funny. I would say for agents listening out there, for your referral partners too, right? Because there are some agents that, well, let's be honest, they don't treat their referral partners the best. And those people are less inclined to give a referral to them. The idea of a referral partner is, hey, I'm helping your business grow. My hope is that you help my business grow. And it's important that you keep it that way. And that's such a great point, though. And I think often on a competitive market, if it switches and changes, and then suddenly you're trying to present a contract, this person has bad thoughts about another, then you're not going to get that deal. Why am I going to work with you if I got 9 other contracts? I'll just tell these other people that they're close on price and let's make it work, right? Good point. I always love to ask my last question kind of for this segment is like a bold move, right? Because I think bold moves in this industry, you already talked about door knocking. You mentioned smile and dial, which is such a big thing. You already gave me a good one with the lady that you called for a good 6 months there and kind of won her over. Do you have another one in the chamber for me that you've thought about that you're like, wow, if I hadn't done this, I don't get that?
If I hadn't taken the leap into this business, I think it's a very scary industry. Being 100% commission based, there is a lot of, I think, fear around that. And there's a lot of just uncertainty of like where that next paycheck is coming from. So for me, taking the bold move to say I'm going to bet on myself, but I'm also being very strategic in how I'm choosing to bet on myself because I know that this is a career for me. I had an agent look at me one time and I was having just one of those kind of growth conversations with her about like, where do you see yourself? What's the end goal here? And I said, I want to be in real estate for my career. Like this is it for me. And she said, well, I'm really happy to hear you say that because anyone who says anything other than that, this is not mainstream for you.
No, it gets tough. You have lean times when you can't make people list their house when they're sitting on 2.25% interest rate. And it's just really pushing through that to kind of come out on the other side. It's a really good point. I had somebody that worked for me one time who doesn't work for me anymore tell me on the loan side that I just want to do 2 deals a month. And in the business, you don't have that choice, right? We don't get to set like, oh, I only want to do 10 deals a month. You're either going up or you're coming down. And that's the only way it is in our industry. It is not just a flat line. So I love the fact that you're just like, this is what I'm committed to. And I think a lot of the people that listen to the show, the newer agents, you kind of have to make that decision. You have to understand this is a commitment. And if you really want to get good at it and the financial incentives and just opportunities that come along with it, you just have to work on your craft.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better.
That's a great bold point, though. So when we come back, I want to talk about your pillars of business right now and how we're getting our next client. So we'll be right back with Michele Casper. Hey everybody, it's Tanner Mulvihill with Bayfield Home Loans. Well, 2023 is here, and if you haven't done so yet, it's time to take a good long look in the mirror and ask yourself an honest question. Is your loan officer helping you succeed? For example, are they bringing you new marketing ideas? Do they actively try to generate referrals from the clients you send to them? Or even better, are they sending you business? My philosophy is business should be a two-way street, and I do my best to make it that way. If that sounds like something you're interested in, please give me a call or shoot me a text to 540-850-6267. Let's get together for coffee. Once again, that number is 540-850-6267. Talk to you soon. Well, welcome back, everyone. So, Michele, you made such great points in our first 2 segments, and I'd like to talk about your pillars of business now. So you've been in business 8 years. What are you focusing on personally to help your business grow?
Past client referrals and agent-to-agent referrals.
Nice. Those are such great points. Now, let's start with one of them to go with past client referrals. How do we get a past client to refer business?
I do pop buys. I check in and call them. I do not just leave them at the closing table and say bye-bye. I really don't. I am a big believer in building those relationships, and a lot of my past clients have become friends. So taking those relationships and saying, I really actually like you as a person. I want to get to know you better. Obviously, if some people are going to stay more in the client side of things, right? Not everybody, you want to be best friends with everybody, but having the client event, doing the pop buys, checking in, and I think legitimately caring about people. There is such a difference in someone who is clearly having commission breaths, who's just, hey, who do you know that's buying or selling?
Yep.
Like, I don't ask that a ton, and that's something I need to personally work on. And I know that about myself. But I also don't necessarily have to ask because they know that I'm going to take care of their friends and family the way I took care of them.
Right.
Because I legitimately care about my clients.
I would ask the agents listening to this, though, and one of the things that I've really focused on the last probably 9 months is making sure that I'm asking for my agents. Right? Because how many referral partners have you recommended to? Here's my home inspector. Here's my contractor. Here's my painter. You refer about business all the time. And then I would ask the question of any agent listening, is your loan officer fighting for you that way, right? Because it's always easier to ask for business for somebody else, in my opinion, than saying, hey, who do you know that's looking to buy and sell in Virginia or Texas or Florida where I'm licensed in, right? But if I can vouch for you and ask for you and just kind of keep that in front of them, oh yeah, I do know somebody coming up. For me, an easier ask than always about me. That's the way I look at it. So that's our past client referrals. We're staying in front of them with the communication, which is such a big part of it. Now, when you mentioned as well, the agent to agent referrals, and I think that's such a great tool to get business. So tell me about how are you reaching out to fellow agents, and are you multi-stating it?
My end goal is to have a referral partner in every major city. And I have a good bit of those already. So one way I've really kind of started doing that is with military. So getting to know other agents who are heavy in the military space across the country, or really honing in on the bases that have a lot of transfers to Fort Gregg Adams, and then blowing those referrals out of the water. Because there's nothing worse than giving a referral to someone and they drop the ball.
Yes.
To me, finding those agents who are really going to make sure that, number one, you're helping my client, that's number one, and having their family and them have a very smooth process. But number two, having it be a positive reflection back on me, and having them say, okay, go back to Michele if you need this. It's really, I think, building those relationships between agents is huge and can be a huge moneymaker for agents as well.
Now, do you have kind of like a game plan where it's okay, on Tuesdays, I'm calling my agent referral partners across the country? Do you have it almost time blocked out for you at least once every month, quarter? Yeah. How do you do it?
Yeah. So I try to stay very active with them on just text, phone call. I don't know that I have a specific, every first Tuesday of the month, I'm going to make phone calls. Again, I'm a little more relational to where it's a little more, I think, friendship and to know those people. But are there absolutely days where I am way more intentional and I say, okay, once a quarter, I need to sit down and do text, phone call, then I'm thinking about you card, birthday, brownies, or hey, I saw that your son just won this award. Congratulations. It's huge. Really getting on a more personal level with people and implementing that all year long compared to just a phone call.
That's a good point. And I wanted to mention something too about the past client referrals. Before I forget, I have started sending out crumble cookies to past clients after they close. So find out if they've gotten into the property and then have some cookies sent out. I figured it'd be a nice way to just kind of stay in front of people in addition to some of the other stuff I do. But right now in your business, is there anything else you'd kind of like to share with the agents about how you're really looking at business right now?
I'm looking at business right now as more of a long-term game. So I have always kind of had that mindset of, I know I want this to be my career. And I have shifted from more of what can I do to get that next deal? Because I feel like agents really start in that place, right? We all are in that place of, okay, wow, I just need to get my feet wet. Where do you meet the next client? And until you can get the foundation of people who believe in you, know you're a realtor, don't be a secret agent, and really get yourself out there, I think at that point, you can kind of shift your mindset over into this is a business.
Right.
And building your brand and your business up. So that's, I think, where I'm trying to build on the business side now. So I'm looking to grow a team. I want to increase what I'm doing. My biggest thing is, and I know this is very typical with agents, is I have a hard time letting go because I want to provide the best possible customer service. My big thing is you get white glove customer service when you work with me. And so I have a hard time taking my hands off the reins because I'm like, no one is me. But I also know that if you build the right systems and you have the right people, build it and they will come. And I know that, but that is something I think everyone should be working towards.
I completely understand and agree. I mentioned that I've been doing this almost 20 years. And for a good part of that, I felt that I was the only one that could do it. And I was the best at it and all those other things. Yeah. And I found that my team members are actually better than I am. Because let's say, for example, that we have an underwriting condition we don't like. Well, my go-to was kind of to call and be like, I disagree, blah, 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 right? And whereas the little bit of honey probably helps. And that's where my loan partner, Barb, comes in because Barb's much better at it than me. So I let Barb deal with that. And I just go over here and do what I do. So it's a great point. And the long-term game, though, because again, we are in a fluctuating market and the people that are figuring out how they're going to come out of this stronger are just going to benefit so much once this shakes out again and goes a different direction. And even if it does go even quote unquote worse, well, that's how you are going to have less competition by the end of this. And you're developing your practices and procedures in place right now. So makes sense. All right. Now, when we come back, I always love a good story. So I'm going to put you on the spot with either a funny or scary story. So we will be right back with Michele Casper.
Tanner Mulvihill, NMLS number 276814.
Welcome back, everyone. So Michele, I always love a good story. So I always like scary, funny, weird, just different stories that we hear in the business. So the floor is yours.
I have a tale of kind of a little bit of a scary story and also just kind of a learning experience, I think, for agents, but also if you're looking to purchase a home. So I had someone close on a house, and as we were at the closing table, a massive storm came through. One of those, it just happened when the client drove up to his house. Turns out a tree fell. And thank God it literally missed like crashing through his house, but it basically landed on the front porch. And there was a ton of damage done. But what I always say to everyone is we are not done until it's done. And technically he did sign. So that was now his problem. Because we had just done our walkthrough. The tree was up.
I don't remember this giant tree across the porch.
Tree came down. So I am a big proponent for getting all the different types of insurance. Pay for your title insurance, get your owner's title insurance, which I know wouldn't necessarily help in that situation, but there are other situations that can arise. So just get all the different types of coverage that you can, because you never know just when something is going to be out of your control.
Yep.
That was really scary because we thought his house was going to be destroyed.
Oh, I'm sure. So let me set the scene. You're sitting in settlement, right? And you're just like, my gosh, it's really storming out there. So did you follow him to the house? Here, I got a few pictures I need to send you real quick.
Literally.
And you were just like, I don't know what to do with this at the moment.
That feeling of elation, right?
Right.
So happy for you. You just closed on this amazing house. Oh, man.
Was he a first-time buyer?
No.
Oh, okay. Thank goodness, right?
Yeah.
The first-time buyers, I knew I should have kept renting.
Yeah, basically.
It's a sign. Who knows? Yeah. Maybe they wanted to take that tree down anyway. Well, Michele, I can't thank you enough for coming on the podcast today. It was a pleasure working with you on the transaction that we did together and just your continued growth in Richmond. Congratulations. And thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me. This was amazing. And I appreciate everything that you've done because you made that transaction very smooth.
Well, thanks again. Well, that's it for this episode of the Virginia is for Realtors podcast. If you're a realtor looking for a loan officer you can count on to follow up with the leads you send, keep you updated on the transaction every step of the way, and get you to the closing table on time, give me a call. I'd love the opportunity to sit down with you for coffee to learn more about your business and how we can make it even better. Until next time, this is Tanner Mulvihill on the Virginia is for Realtors podcast.